Baruchot habaot, ladies, and welcome to another edition of Torah Anytime. So happy that you're back here after Chag HaShavuot. It's so amazing that we can continue part 2 of our Emunah series, but before we do, just a couple of announcements. First of all, we want to daven for Pazit Golda Bat Zipora and Dov Ber Yosef Ben Sarah Imenu, that they should very, very, very soon find a house that they could live in. Yeah. Shem should fulfill all of their wishes bekarov mamash. Also, the shiur is dedicated Leilui Nishmat Moshe Natan Ben Baruch and Chaya Moshka Bat Shneir Zalman Alea Shalom, as well as for the refuah shlema of Rav Mordechai Ben Rachel, and to all those in Klal Yisrael that need refuot and yeshuot. Amen. Also, I know that next week, Be'ezat Hashem, there is a huge jewelry convention in Las Vegas, Nevada, where I was just visiting last week with my mother, and we had a huge shiur over there. And I want to give a shout out to Shuli, the owner of Jerusalem Grill. It's the most amazing restaurant there. Baruch Hashem, it's under the kosher supervision of Chabad of South Nevada, Southern Nevada. I just want to tell you that the food there is outstanding. Really, really, really delicious food. A1, the atmosphere is amazing. The ambiance is so special. For those of you who want to know a little bit more about it, if you ever happen to be in Las Vegas, Nevada, especially if you're going to the jewelry convention or any of the conventions, you could just look it up at www.jerusalemgrillvegas.com. jerusalemgrillvegas.com. Okay, we can begin. In part 1 of our series on Emunah, we were trying to establish an important foundation in Emunah, and that is the awareness and knowledge of a creator. We brought up some facts about the way the world runs, the way our bodies function, which prove that there must be a creator to this world, and that we didn't appear out of some big bang explosion, nor did we evolve from some bacteria. So in part 2 of our series, I want to discuss one of those theories of evolution which claims that human beings evolved from apes and we weren't necessarily created by a divine being. I'll begin the class with the following story that took place in Europe with Chaim Nachman Bialik and Echad Ha'am, who were students in the Volozhina Yeshiva in Europe during their youth. During that time, the Haskalah movement was predominant, and one day Chaim Nachman Bialik and his followers came into the yeshiva and informed their fellow students that after much thinking and deliberations, they came to the conclusion that they think they indeed descended from the monkey. So the other yeshiva students asked, well, what's your proof that we came from the ape? And they answered, very simple. The fact that there's a tailbone that begins from the lower end of the back and extends itself higher, that's a sign that we had a tail. So the students asked Chaim Nachman, so where's the tail now? And Bialik answered, well, it must have happened that at some point the ancient ape decided that the tail was useless, so he went ahead and rubbed himself against the wall like this, and the tail eventually fell off. Nice dance he did. The yeshiva students had a hard time believing this, so the debate continued, and they asked Chaim Nachman, well, if that's the case, a person whose hand was, God forbid, cut off would still bear offspring that had 2 hands. So this ancient ape's offspring should have been born with a tail, no? And Bialik said, no. All the monkeys of that generation understood that the tail was simply superfluous and useless. So they all rubbed their tails off with the understanding that the tail was no longer necessary. Therefore, the next generations that followed were also born without a tail. The yeshiva students then said, so if that's the case, we could definitely prove that what you're saying is incorrect. Because if it works according to what you say, then how is it that over 4,000 years the Jewish people are performing a Brit Milah, where we remove the foreskin with the understanding that we're removing it, and still our children are born with the foreskin? It must be that what you and your buddies decided is completely invalid. This was the argument, ladies. Now, I want to add another point. They tell us that we evolved from the monkeys, from the apes. But I find it very interesting that not all the apes evolved into human beings. There are still hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of apes in different species of the ape family that haven't evolved into human beings. I don't know at what point the ape decided, I'm not any longer going to evolve into a human being. Let me stay an ape. I also don't know what would possess an ape to want to stay an ape and eat bananas all day long and swing from one vine to the next. Certainly being a human being has a lot more benefits. Don't know how it happened that pitom the apes stopped evolving, but that's, I don't know. But the point is, what happened in Europe? Chaim Nachman Bialik didn't accept or understand this idea that was posed to him by his fellow friends, and he opted to remain a monkey. But in any case, these were the theories that were being spread during the time of the Haskalah movement, and these theories came about in order to reject the possibility that the world was indeed created by a creator. Why? Because it's easier this way. It's more convenient. If you conclude that there is no creator, then you could do whatever you want. If there's no creator, then it stands to reason that any laws that are supposedly governed by this higher being are also null and void. And you could now live without restrictions and without guilt. Now, we all know that Darwin decided over 100 years ago that man originated from the ape. And you should know that he wasn't the first person to come up with this theory. He was, however, the one who spread this abominable idea. But later on, Stephen Hawking claimed that the world was created through some form of an explosion. We discussed this briefly in part 1. But the bottom line is that no one can explain what created that first creation. What created that first explosion? All these scientists began their theories at a specific point, but they don't carry the theory through to its originating source. You should know that there are many Jews studying in secular environments here and in Eretz Yisrael, and they're being taught that man is a direct descendant of the ape. What a compliment this is, right? So if these Jews don't learn Torah, if they don't know the truth, they'll never discover a real sense of enlightenment. Think about it. In Parashat Bereshit, we're introduced to the creation of the world by the one and only creator, by the Ribono Shel Olam. If you read Bereshit, this can strengthen your emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and if your emunah is fortified, it helps you to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu from a deeply profound place. I find that in this generation, many people are struggling with their emunah in Hashem. Many people are suffering when it concerns their faith in God. There are too many forces out there that are attempting to destroy the very foundation of our Torah. In a world that seems to be veering towards liberalism and all kinds of atheistic ideologies where God's name can't even be mentioned because it's politically incorrect, it's incumbent upon us to challenge this ideology, to face it, and to destroy it at its roots. And how do we do it? Specifically by spreading the truth of Torah to all who will hear it, and to teach this truth so that people can choose from that place of truth and not live a life of falsehood. Ladies, this is why it's so important. Whoever is listening to these shiurim, these classes of emunah and bitachon, you have to take it and link it somewhere and send it to as many people as you possibly can and ask them to do the same. These shiurim have to be spread so that everybody out there in the world can understand that there is indeed a Borei La'olam, there is a creator, and that they should cling to him. Ladies, emunah and bitachon is something that's lacking in this generation, and we could all use a dosage of koach, of emunah, and as Jews we have an obligation to strengthen anyone in our midst that we see is struggling in this area. Therefore, since I'm certain that you'll meet people who may need a push towards seeking the truth, why not fortify our knowledge so we can have the tools to help others? And certainly Torah Anytime is enabling us to spread that truth, and I give you permission to do so. You know, I was once asked by a high school student the following question. She said, how come you say that all these scientists are speaking nonsense, that it's just a bunch of groundless theories? Maybe it's true, and if it's not true, prove to me that there's a God in the world. Ladies, with just a few pieces of information, you could give your fellow brother or sister some idea, at least to consider. And then you can send them to the appropriate seminars or lectures so they can expand their knowledge all the more. Within a matter of minutes, you could prove that there is indeed a creator and not that we came from monkeys, fish, atoms, or some bacteria. So I want to tell you what I answered that young lady who asked me to provide her with logical proof that this world has a creator. I told her the following. First of all, you're living proof that there's a creator. How? It's very simple. You see, if we could prove that you were created and not that you created yourself, that means that someone who was here before you created you. I'll say it again for those of you out there who just got confused. If I could prove that you were created and that you didn't create yourself, it must be that whoever was here before you was the one who created you. If I was created and before me there was someone else who was also created, and before them there are those who were also created, etc., etc., if you go all the way back, there must be the original creator of all these creations, because it's not possible to be created without a creator who created you. But we also have to add, and it stands to reason, that the first and original creator didn't have a creator. Because if the original creator has a creator, then he's not the creator. He himself is a creation. And a creation without a creator isn't a conceivable idea. Therefore, there must be a creator that created all these creations. And that creator wasn't created by anything or anyone. So far, so good. And then I told this girl, there must be a creator because I did not create myself. Since I did not create myself, this is the ultimate proof of the idea and existence of a creator. You see, there are two possibilities, and I'll show it to you now, and this is what I showed her. One cup is me. The other cup is the possibility that we just spoke about. So here we go. Either I was already here before I created myself, right? Or I wasn't here before I created myself. If I was already here, if I existed before I created myself, then there would be no need for me to create myself because I was already in existence. If I wasn't here, if I wasn't in existence before I created myself, how could I create myself if I wasn't here in the first place to create myself? But it makes perfect sense. So it must be that I was created by someone who was here before me and that I did not create myself. That's it. That's the whole thing. And this is without years of study or academic research. That's what I told that girl. Was it enough? Of course not. So let me repeat this idea to you again so it's solidified in your mind, and then I'll continue to tell you what I proceeded to tell this girl. Again, I am a creation. You are a creation. You out there at Torah Anytime, you're a creation. Everything else in the world, even a grain of sand, is a creation. Every creation either created itself, meaning that it came into existence all on its own, like they're telling us, or it was created by something or someone that came before it. If you created yourself, that means you were already here in order to create yourself. But if you were already in existence, there was no need to create yourself if you were already here. Now, if you didn't exist at all, then how did you come into being if you weren't here to create yourself? You hear? This is all philosophical argumentation, but it makes sense. Therefore, ladies, it's not possible for someone to have created himself. It had to have been that someone who preceded him created him. That applies to every aspect of creation. Every creation down to a grain of sand didn't create itself. Therefore, I'm a creation, and before me were my parents who made me, and before them their parents created them, and we can go back until we arrive at the first creation. Every creation is proof of a creator. But there must be, and there is, a first creation. There is a Bereshit. The first creation necessitates and proves that whoever preceded it created it. So the question is, who created the first creation? We'll call him the Creator, the Boré. The Creator created the first creation. How do I know that there's a Creator? Because the creation itself is proof of the existence of a Creator, since it didn't create itself. The whole world didn't create itself. Now, who created the Creator? The Creator does not have a Creator. How do I know this? Because if the Creator had a Creator, what did we say earlier? If the Boré had a Boré, if the Creator had a Creator, then he would also be a creation and not the ultimate and only Creator. He wouldn't be Echad ve'Yachid. So there must be only one Creator who created the first creation. Otherwise, there wouldn't be creations, because without a Boré La'olam, there are no creations. And if there are creations, ladies, there is proof that there's a Creator. Ladies, your parents created you, and their parents created them, and so on and so forth. I don't have to see your great-great-great-grandparents to know that you were created by them, because the fact that you exist is proof that you had great-great-great-grandparents who came before you who created you. And if they wouldn't have created you, you wouldn't be here today. If you go back to the very first human being, somebody created him as well. And you have to be mindful of the fact that just because I don't see the Creator doesn't mean that he doesn't exist. In the same way that I don't have to see your ancestors to know that they existed and they brought you into being. I don't see the air that I breathe or the electricity that flows in the walls that provides me with light. But the outcome of both proves to me that the air and the electricity exists because how would I be able to breathe if there was no air? And how would I be able to see in the dark if there was no electricity? And I don't have to see your brain to know you have one, even though I don't see it. The fact that I don't see something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. If there's light, there's electricity. If the wind blows through my window, I know that air exists. If I'm here, there must be a Borei La'olam, there must be a creator. Therefore, there must be an initial creator who created all of creation. Ladies, that's the whole story with no monkey business. Now, because this is such a complex topic for some people out there, I want to summarize everything that we've been saying until now. If you can come to the understanding that you did not create yourself only by virtue of the fact that someone did create you, that being your parents who came before you, then we've already established the fact that you did not create yourself, but rather that you were created. In short, you're a creation, you're a bria. Not only that, but even your parents who came before you were a creation of the people who came before them. And if you go back like this for generations upon generations, you're going to come to the first human being that was ever created. So the question would be, who created that first human being? It must be that this first human being was himself a creation, because he couldn't have created himself. Why couldn't he have created himself? Because of what we said earlier. Nobody here just came into being from an explosion, from some poof, and you were here. Why? Because what gave that explosion or that poof the idea, and how an explosion or a poof has any form of chokhmah, any form of wisdom is beyond me. But what gave that explosion the idea to create such an intricate and delicate world with all its laws of nature and physics? What's more plausible? That there was a creator that created this vast and intricate and beautiful and precise world, or that it came from some explosion? And if you're going to ask, well, why couldn't an explosion bring this entire world into being after millions of years? Why couldn't have I evolved from monkeys? I have an answer for that too. See, I was once, many years ago, at one of Rav Amnon Yitzchak Shalita's lectures in Eretz Yisrael, where a female journalist asked him the following question. She said, "Tell me, Rabbi, do you really reject Darwin's theory that man evolved from the monkey?" So the Rav said, "Tell me something. Do you really believe that man descended from the monkey?" And she said, "Sure I do. Everybody knows that we came from the ape." And the rabbi said, "Listen, I don't believe I came from the monkey. I looked into my family tree and there's nobody there from the baboon family. I don't have relatives from the baboon clan." And then he said the following: "If I were to take a cup filled with ink and toss it on a white piece of paper, how many times would I have to toss the ink so that the letter Aleph would be formed in an Arial font, symmetrically perfect and in print? How many times would I have to throw the ink?" She said, "Oh, for that to happen, you'd have to throw the ink in the air a few 100 million times." So the Rav said, "And after we toss it a few 100 million times, the letter Aleph will be formed exactly as I described?" And she said, "It's probable that out of a few million hundred tries it could happen." So the Rav said, okay, suppose it would happen after a few 100 million times. How many times would I have to throw the ink in this cup in order to get the letter Mem next to the letter Aleph in the same size, font, and specifications as the Aleph, and that it shouldn't erase the Aleph. How many times? And she said, oh, for that to happen, you'd have to throw the ink billions of times. So the Rav said, wait a second, I think you didn't understand what I said. If I toss it once and I'm not successful the first time, it's for sure gonna erase the Aleph. And don't forget that it took us a few 100 million times to get the Aleph. I want a mem next to the Aleph in one shot, because if it's not in the first try, the Aleph is going to be erased. Could we accomplish that? And she said, for that to happen, we would have to try several billion times and get the Aleph and the mem together at once. Hello, look how deeply rooted the emunah is in this craziness. But anyway, the Rav continued. He says, okay. How many times would I have to toss the ink in this cup in order to get a nun next to the letter mem without erasing the mem or the aleph that, according to you, we managed to accomplish to finally get after a few billion tries? How many times? And she said, oh, now that's impossible already. So the Rav finally says, well, then tell me. If an aleph and the mem and a nun cannot be created in such a manner, then the name Amnon, with all its letters, can never have come into complete existence as a coincidence. So how is it possible that Amnon Yitzchak is here and whole, with trillions of cells that all function in unison and perfectly? How could I have come into being from the Big Bang Theory, from a mere explosion, or from a coincidence, from variabilities and bacteria? She had nothing to say. Ladies, according to these blasphemous theories, you know how you were created? The evolutionists claim that there was an explosion, and from that explosion, a hair was created. After a while, there was another explosion, and another hair was created. So now, where should all these hairs go? We need a skull, right? No? So they say from all these explosions, all of a sudden, a skull was formed, and the hairs began moving. In other words, the hairs understood all on their own that they belonged on top of the skull. Then suddenly, boom, an eye. But one eye knows it's not enough, it needs another eye. So what does it do? It begins to search out, and suddenly it sees another eye just millions of light years away, and it begins calling it over. Come on, eye, come on, let's go, come on, come over here, we need you. So the other eye came, and two eyes popped right into the designated spot, and presto, skull, eyes, nose, mouth, hair. Now, of course, this is ridiculous, and I'm oversimplifying things, but I think you understand my point, and you realize how ridiculous this is. But people believe this nonsense, and this is what our fellow brothers and sisters are learning in the universities and actually receiving degrees in this field of study. This, ladies, is the power of the Satan implemented in the world so that the Jews should not put on tefillin or begin to have faith in something greater than themselves. The reason why it's hard for so many people to accept the idea of a creator is because the minute I agree that there's a creator, I'm then forced to heed his requests, and heeding his requests obligates me and maybe even confines and restricts me. Not only that, but if I don't heed the words of the Creator, there may be consequences I just don't want to experience. So it's more convenient to live a life free of God and all the obligations such a belief comes with. Now, to walk around assuming there's no creator is a bit absurd. Why? Because who was it that brought the heavens, the earth, and all the constellations into existence? Yeshaya Hanavi alav shalom says, Se'u marom enechem ure'u mi vara ele. Lift up your eyes on high and see who created all of these. Hamotzi v'mispar tzeva'am. Who takes out their host by number? Lechulam b'shem yikra. All of them he calls by name. Every star and every galaxy has a name and a particular function. Merov onim ve'amitz koach ish lo nedar. Because of Hashem's great might and because of His strong power, no one is missing and everyone is accounted for in this world. Halo yadata? Im lo shamata? Do you not know? Have you not heard? Elokei olam Hashem. An everlasting God is Hashem. Borei ketzot haaretz. He's the creator of the ends of the earth. Lo yi'af v'lo yiga. He neither tires nor is he weary. Noten laya'ef koach. He gives the tired his strength. Ule'en onim atzma yarbeh. And to the person who has no strength, he increases his strength. You hear these words? So it's not just that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this world. He also set into motion the entire system of the constellation, and the entire structure of the universe functions according to a very precise mechanism that HaKadosh Baruch Hu set in place in order for mankind to be able to live without complications. That means that if the sun was just a few miles away from the earth, we'd freeze. We'd freeze to death. And if the sun was just a few miles closer to the earth, we'd melt from the heat. If the oxygen levels changed just a little bit, we wouldn't survive. And this tiny planet called Earth, which is the only planet that contains human beings, this tiny planet is being served by the entire system and all the heavenly constellations and its hosts that HaKadosh Baruch Hu set into motion. Ladies, if you want to see Hashem, you just have to look for Him. In Sefer Yirmiyah, alav shalom, Hashem says, "Uvikashtem oti umetzatem." And if you seek me, and you will seek me and find me. Ki tidreshuni bechol levavchem, for you will seek me with all your heart. If you truly want to feel and know that there is a God in the world who fashioned this existence, you only have to look for Him and seek Him out with all your heart. Ladies, all you have to do is look at the wonder of nature and you will see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Think about it. The universe operates by some uniform laws of nature. Why? Look at all the things that as human beings we can count on day after day, like gravity. Gravity remains consistent. A hot cup of coffee left on a counter is going to get cold. The earth rotates in the same 24 hours. And the speed of light doesn't change. How is it that we can identify laws of nature that never change? Why is the universe so orderly and so reliable? The greatest Scientists are perplexed, they're baffled by how strange this consistency and exactness is. They realize that there's no logical necessity for a universe that obeys the rules, let alone that abides by the rules of mathematics. It's astonishing to think about the fact that this world and the universe doesn't have to behave this way. If the sun wanted, we said about it, the other class, if the sun wanted, it didn't have to rise if it didn't want to, or set. The famous scientist Richard Feynman once wrote in his book titled The Meaning of It All, he wrote the following. I'm going to quote him. He said, "It's easy to imagine an entire universe in which conditions change unpredictably from instant to instant, or even a universe in which things pop in and out of existence." Hear what he's saying? In other words, who says that the sun may one day decide all on its own not to shine? Richard Feynman, this Nobel Prize winner for quantum electrodynamics, said the following: "Why nature is mathematical is a mystery. The fact that there are rules at all is a kind of miracle. Ladies, and these rules have remained constant so that we could live in this world with a sense of predictability and feel safe." The famed author C.S. Lewis, who was an atheist at one point in his life and then he changed his mind, he explained in one of his books that when he was an atheist, it always bothered him that people believed in God. But at some point he wondered what it was about atheists that they spent so much time and so much attention refuting something that they don't even believe even exists. You hear this? What causes them to do that? If I don't believe in something, why should I put so much attention to it? And then when he thought about it, at first he excused it by assuming that as an atheist, his intention was to care and to guide all these poor and delusional people and to help them realize that their dreams and hope in a creator was completely unfounded. But then, when he was honest with himself, he realized that really he had another motive. And he realized that as he challenged those who believed in God, really, he was very curious to see if those people could somehow convince him that there is indeed a creator. There was a part of him that wanted to free himself from this question of whether or not there was a God or if this world evolved all on its own. He felt that if he could conclusively prove to all those believers that they were wrong, then this issue would be off the table and he could go about his life freely. But what he realized was that it wasn't so simple to prove those believers wrong. Mr. Lewis didn't realize that the reason the topic of a creator weighed so heavily on his mind was because it was HaKadosh Baruch Hu Bichvodo Uve'atzmo, Hashem himself, who was pressing the issue. And what he realized at that moment was that God wants to be known. God wants us to look for him. Hashem created us with the intention that we should know him and seek him out. This Mr. Lewis just couldn't escape thinking about the possibility of a creator. In fact, the day he chose to acknowledge HaKadosh Baruch Hu's existence, his prayer that morning began with the words, "Okay, you win." You know what conclusion Mr. Lewis and many atheists like him came to? They all realized that it might very well be that the underlying reason all these atheists are bothered by people believing in God is because God is actually pursuing them, these atheists. So C.S. Lewis writes the following words. I'm going to quote him. He said, "Night after night, feeling whenever my mind lifted even for a second from my work, the steady, unrelenting approach of him who I so earnestly desired not to meet." Meaning he felt Hashem approaching. "I gave in and admitted that God was God. And then I knelt and prayed." Mr. Lewis had no other choice but to rightfully admit HaKadosh Baruch Hu's existence. And when he did, he writes, "Over the following several months, I became amazed by his love for me." Ladies, the question of, is there a God, is not a difficult question at all. Actually, the question that seems most puzzling, at least to me, is, why are we so determined to explain away the existence of a creator? Why can't we give credit where credit is due? You know why? Because if there's a creator, then that means we're his creations, and therefore we have to be accountable to him. Unfortunately, nobody teaches you the problems with evolution, with naturalism, with materialism. People are simply taught that the Big Bang is fact. What's the result of that? The result is that you have a mass number of people who are not educated, but rather they're indoctrinated. And what's the end result of that programming, of that brainwashing? Unfortunately, the ultimate result is that people are being programmed to believe that there is no divine lawmaker, and by virtue of their teachings, there is no absolute law or morality. So in today's society, moral codes and civil laws are merely relative. This is a world that's taking on the motto of survival of the fittest. Very few people stop to consider why or how morality even developed, because those people are taught that there is no God. So who cares about morality? If those people were to consider the possibility that perhaps there is a creator and that he is the one who instituted the laws of morality, that would obligate them. But you see, all these evolutionists are unable to account for the development of the moral code that's inherent in every single human being. They can't explain why we don't want to steal all on our own, why we don't want to kill all on our own. They can't explain why we have an inherent moral code. They choose to ignore that truth, just like they ignore HaKadosh Baruch Hu altogether. Our society suffers tremendously when we're taught that we share a common heritage with the apes. And then we wonder why our children behave like animals today. So ladies, I want to end part 2 of our series on Emunah with a very moving article that I read. I want to read it to you verbatim so it doesn't lose any of its meaning and depth. If you remember, quite a number of years ago, following the Columbine high school shootings, Darrell Scott, the father of Rachel Scott, who was unfortunately a victim of the Columbine high school shootings in Littleton, Colorado, he was invited to address the House Judiciary Committee's subcommittee. And what he said to our national leaders during this special session of Congress was painfully truthful. They weren't prepared for what he had to say, and it wasn't received well either. But it needs to be heard by every parent, by every teacher, every politician, every sociologist, every psychologist, every evolutionist, and every so-called expert. Because his courageous words that this man spoke, they're powerful, they're penetrating, and they're deeply personal. There's no doubt that God sent this man as a voice, as a mediator as a cry. The following that I'm going to read to you is a portion of the transcript of his session there. Listen to what he said to them. Since the dawn of creation, there has been both good and evil in the hearts of men and women. We all contain the seeds of kindness or the seeds of violence. The death of my wonderful daughter, Rachel Joy Scott, and the deaths of that heroic teacher and the other 11 children who died must not be in vain. Their blood cries out for answers. The first recorded act of violence was when Cain slew his brother Hevel out in the field. The villain was not the club he used, neither was it the NCA, the National Club Association. The true killer was Cain. And the reason for the murder could only be found in Cain's heart. In the days that followed the Columbine tragedy, I was amazed at how quickly fingers began to be pointed at groups such as the NRA. I'm not a member of the NRA. I'm not a hunter. I don't even own a gun. I'm not here to represent or to defend the NRA because I don't believe that they are responsible for my daughter's death. Therefore, I do not believe that they need to be defended. If I believed that they had anything to do with Rachel's murder, I would be their strongest opponent. I am here today to declare that Columbine was not just a tragedy. It was a spiritual event that should be forcing us to look at where the real blame lies. Much of the blame lies here in this room. Much of the blame lies behind the pointing fingers of the accusers themselves. So I wrote a poem just 4 nights ago that expresses my feelings best. Your laws ignore our deepest needs. Your words are empty air. You've stripped away our heritage. You've outlawed simple prayer. Now gunshots fill our classrooms and precious children die. You seek for answers everywhere and ask the question, why? You regulate restrictive laws through legislative creed, and yet you fail to understand that God is who we need. And then Darrell Scott continued with these words. Men and women are 3-part beings. We all consist of body, mind, and spirit. When we refuse to acknowledge a 3rd part of our makeup, we create a void that allows evil, prejudice, and hatred to rush in and wreak havoc. Spiritual presences were present within our educational systems for most of our nation's history. Many of our major colleges began as theological seminaries. This is a historical fact. What has happened to us as a nation? We have refused to honor God, and in so doing, we open the doors to hatred and violence. And when something as terrible as Columbine's tragedy occurs, politicians immediately look for a scapegoat, such as the NRA. They immediately seek to pass more restrictive laws that contribute to erode away our personal and private liberties. We do not need more restrictive laws. Eric and Dylan would not have been stopped by metal detectors. No amount of gun laws can stop someone who spends months planning this type of massacre. The real villain lies within our hearts. As my son Craig lay under that table in the school library and saw his 2 friends murdered before his very eyes, he did not hesitate to pray in that school building. I defy any law or politician to deny him that right. I challenge every young person in America and around the world to realize that on April 20th, 1999, at Columbine High School, prayer was brought back to our schools. Do not let the many prayers offered by those students be in vain. Dare to move into the new millennium with a sacred disregard for legislation that violates your God-given right to communicate with Him. So those of you who would point your finger at the NRA, I give to you a sincere challenge. Dare to examine your own heart before casting the first stone. We'll stop here and continue with part 3 of our Emunah series next week, Be'ezrat Hashem. Tune in and get as many of your friends, relatives, and anyone you know to listen to these lectures, because the stronger our Emunah is in Hashem, the more powerful of a unit we become. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu enlighten us all with His presence, His knowledge, and may we merit to seek Him out, find Him, and feel His love in every day of our life. Amen Ken. Yehi Ratzon.